this is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.
Body Bags with Joseph Scott Morgan. You know, down in New Orleans, one of the things that New Orleanians pride themselves on is holding on to the past. And holding on to the past is really played out down there in the sense that there are so many old homes that have survived all of these years, these decades, as a matter of fact, things that you can't imagine would still be standing, you know, and it's not just termites, it's hurricanes, fires, cholera outbreaks, yellow fever, but yet the structures remain. And the thing about structures is that they have a story to tell. Over the years, people have asked me on any number of occasions, do you ever see ghosts? Because of what I did for a living. And I have to be honest with you, I never have. I've never seen any kind of spiritual manifestation in my presence or anything like that. However, there is something within me that believes that places are haunted. I don't know what it is. There are just certain locations you can go to and you kind of get a chill. Well, one such place exists in Louisville, Kentucky. And we're going to talk about that place today because this particular location, which is an old Victorian house, is actually on the haunted tour of the city of Louisville. I think you might enjoy it. Let's dig in. I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags. I saw Dave laughing when I said dig in because this case in particular involves a bit of digging. But let me back up. I have to say that I'm doing this episode because my wife asked me to. Kimmy. You know, I always talk about Kimmy. And how can I say no to her? And the reason I did is she was doing some reading, and actually I have to full disclosure, she was actually doing some research for me on buried bodies. And she said, you gotta do this case. Case is fascinating. It's got so many twists and turns. And look, a lot of other people have done this. All right. You can just go online and kind of check it out. But the reason she wanted me to do this is because it reminded her of a case that I worked when I was in Atlanta. And before I tell you about today's case, let me tell you about that case. There were 3 men that had come to Atlanta, and they were staying in one of the high-rise hotels in downtown Atlanta. And there's several of them down there. I'm not going to name the hotel. But for 3 days, they had stayed in a room doing crystal meth and having unbridled sex with one another for 3 days. And many times what you will have is that, particularly when a number of different types of drugs, but crystal meth in particular, I think that there is a drug-induced psychosis that takes place many times with folks that, you know, imbibe, if you will. And in this particular case, they were on the 22nd floor. This individual came running past the bank of elevators there. A lady was getting on with her child. He's completely nude. He's screaming. And he runs to the end of the hallway and jumps through a window, like a floor-to-ceiling plate glass window. Plummets, are you ready for this? Plummets all these floors down. It's in the summertime. He hits, when he impacts the object below, which is actually the top of the pool house adjacent to this big fancy pool, his head splits open and a large portion of his brain flies out of his head and lands in the hot tub. And there's kids, families, you know, that are swimming in the big pool. Thankfully, there was no one in the hot tub at the time. That case, as you can imagine, kind of stuck with me all these many years. And I remember distinctly coming home and telling my wife about it. And, you know, it's like one of those moments you can't make this stuff up. And as a matter of fact, if I tried to take that story probably to Hollywood and into a producer's office, they'd laugh me out because it just seems like it's completely implausible. But it's amazing to me, Dave, the circumstances that humans put themselves in many times. And our story today involves three individuals that had put themselves into some interesting positions.
A brain in the hot tub?
Yeah.
I'm not eating wonton soup anymore. That's it. Done with that.
It was horrible. The bad thing about it is, and as ghastly as this is, we had to use the skimmer net to get that remnant of brain. Yeah. And the other thing about it is that there was, and I felt so sorry for these family members that were subjected to this. There was blood like leaking down the front of the pool house, and he was laying there, and his head is completely shattered. You could see him from that perspective. I remember trying to take photos from where I was standing. You couldn't really appreciate it because it's so many floors up. And let me tell you something. This is one of those moments, Dave, when I was terrified because I was it was above 20 floors. It seemed that the number 22 stands out to me. And I remember getting vertigo. I was standing there looking out of that window. And, if you've never been into a big city, folks, and you're on top of one of these buildings, and I've been on several because I've had to work jumpers, those buildings create a canyon. And so wind, just like it might be completely steady on the ground, but you get up at that elevation and the wind whips through those streets and the avenues and everything, and it literally swirls up there. It's really dangerous. I mean, it's terrifying. And I remember thinking I'm going to get swept out of this thing. I went so far as to lay on the floor and crawl toward the opening in the glass and started taking pictures. And of course, nothing I took really turned out. We had a crime scene tech at that particular time that was working for the Atlanta Police Department, and they happened to have a telephoto lens, and they needed it anyway. They had to take their own, and I wound up getting some of their images, and it beat all I'd ever seen. I'd never seen anything happen like this. It's like a cerebral evisceration, by well, let me tell you how doctors define this, and this is kind of funny. Pathologists will actually list a cause of death. And get that, you're going to love this. I can see it coming. One of the things they talk about with motor vehicle accidents and falls, the beauty of this, the logic. They say death as a result of rapid deceleration. And that was the ultimate in a rapid deceleration death. Okay. And you see it in motor vehicle accidents, but that, you're going to fall. I don't know that at 22 stories, if you could actually hit terminal velocity, I don't think that you could, but you're cooking and it's not like being in a car. It's just you, man. It's just you against Mother Earth at that point in time. And that pool house, and he just impacted. I mean, it was dead center, man.
It was
dead
sad.
Center.
Moms everywhere screaming, "Get out of the pool! Get out of the pool!" And the kids going, "Come on, Mom! It's just in the hot tub."
I felt so sorry, man. There were little kids down there too. It was horrible. It was horrible. I don't know what it was about, and I know other medical legal death investigators around the country that, if there's any out there, I know that many of them have jumper stories because they're not things that happen regularly. But you do get enough of them, particularly if you work in obviously large urban areas. You'll get them. And I've had bridge jumpers, building jumpers. What else? I've had a guy that fell through an open hatch on a super tanker, and you wouldn't believe what the inside of an empty super tanker looks like because it had been emptied of oil, and I had to go down the internal ladder. I was terrified there too. And he hit the I-beam down there. Again, rapid deceleration injuries. So yeah, just because they're dead doesn't mean that you're not in danger as a death investigator. But hey, Dave, this case today.
I think we have to go back to the one you already started. Let's talk about. I want to know. Look, the kind of transfer. This particular case, though, we're not talking about a a hotel, but we're talking about a building that is so old, a house that is so old that the actual police that show up think it could be multiple apartments. They don't even know exactly where to go because it's such a beautiful, beautiful place.
It's gorgeous,
it's huge. Man. And that's why when a 911 call comes in, just give you a heads up here. First of all, you already know we're going to be telling a story about 3 men.
Yeah.
Because you kind of let the cat out of the bag when you told us the gay story in the hotel and rapid deceleration, which is not going to leave my brain now for a long time.
Don't say leave your brain. Please don't. Let's don't talk about that.
Could have done without that one. But at any rate, Jamie Carroll is a hairstylist, and he also is gay, and he decides to leave his small town upbringing to go to an area where he can find more acceptance.
Yeah.
So he goes to the big city, and things don't work out really as fast as they need to. He's having trouble making bills. And like many people do, he starts dealing drugs a little bit on the side to try to make ends meet. Usually when you start doing that, it's because you actually are using drugs too, and in that party lifestyle, and you use the drug selling to add to your purchasing. And anyway, you end up becoming a drug dealer, you know?
Yeah.
And so Jamie Carroll was a hairstylist who ended up down a very bad path for himself because he seemed like a very nice man. Jeffrey Mundt is a incredibly well-educated guy. He's a top official at Northwestern University. He actually was doing a technology overhaul for the university. Imagine that. Imagine what it would be like to be in charge of doing a technology overhaul for a top 10 college.
Yes.
And Northwestern's up there. I mean,
oh yeah, absolutely. It's certainly in the top 20.
Now,
and one of the most expensive colleges in the nation as well, in Chicago.
And Jeffrey Mundt, very well paid. And by the way, is he's very loud about his alternative lifestyle.
Right.
He is not in the closet. There's not a closet in his house. And everyone he works with knows this about him. He doesn't want this to be something that is, comes back and gets him. So he's very outward. He's gay. Anyway, well, he also has another friend, and this guy is Joey Banis. Now, Joey comes from a very well-to-do family. His dad's a surgeon, I think. Big money, lots of connections. But for whatever reason, Joey he's the black sheep of the family. If he's an only child, he's still the black sheep of the family.
Right.
And he's just that kid that he grew up with all of the possible opportunities and advantages that any one person can have, and turned his back on them and got tatted up and ran down a felony highway. So, and also gay, also into drugs. As a matter of fact, Joey and Jamie were close as drug pals. Well, Joey is dating Jeffrey Mundt, and they have, I'm trying to find the right way to put this, a lover's quarrel.
Yeah.
And Jeffrey calls 911. He's scared to death that Joey is going to kill him. His boyfriend's going to kill him.
Right.
And so the police arrive. Now, here you have this incredible home that, again, I say the police couldn't even find it right off, because they show up at that building, but it looks like it's an apartment complex. It does not look like one home. And I can't imagine that, Joe. I mean, you mentioned how New Orleans and even certain areas of Atlanta have these kinds of homes that are so big that you just look at it and go, it's not the Clampetts going, who lives upstairs? No. These are big homes.
Yeah. And I've been, and I got to tell you, in case anyone's ever wondered about this, and I hate to say this, but when you show up on a scene where you're dealing with individuals that have power and money, and they live this kind of ostentatious kind of lifestyle where you first off, the value of the properties in there, and everything is perfectly manicured when you show up there. And listen, bad things happen in those neighborhoods as well. Yep. It doesn't happen with greater frequency as it does if you're out with, people that are just struggling day to day and they don't have a lot of money, but things still, and sometimes things get really dark in those environments. Sometimes I think that, many people have too much money and too much time on their hands. Is the way it plays out. They're not putting forth in life to go down a good path to try to, I don't know, to try to benefit themselves and other folks, and they get distracted and they wind up in drugs. And and in this particular case, if I had been the investigator that would have shown up, I'd probably think the same thing. What unit is this in?
Right.
It ain't in a unit. It's in the house.
It is the house. It is the house.
And I've been to, and listen, I've been in homes before. I've been like in Creole what are referred to as Creole mansions in New Orleans. Everything's leaded glass. They've still got the original medallions on the ceiling where the chandeliers are hanging down from.
Wow.
And you walk through it, and as a kid that grew up really poor, I'd look around, in these places, and I'd say, why am I here? And then I have to tell myself I'm a death investigator. That's why I'm here. And I've got somebody that's dead, and you have to sally forth and do the job.
Right. Well, that's what I was going to ask you about this, because this one started off with a domestic violence call.
Yep.
And most of us know that police hate a domestic violence call.
They hate them. Yeah.
They're horrible because they can go so bad so fast. And I don't think there's any difference between boy, girl, boy, boy, girl, girl. Domestic violence is domestic violence, and they're just as risky no matter who it is. And in this case, Jeffrey Mundt, the super educated, rich guy, is on the phone telling them that his boyfriend, Joey Banis, he's going to kill him. And so when the police get there, they find Joey. He's tatted up, and Joey tells them a story. They cuff him and take him downtown. Now, Joey knows he's got a lot of legal issues. He's had a history with law enforcement. Jeffrey Mundt, meanwhile, not so much. And so they take Joey downtown. They believe Jeffrey Mundt is the victim. And on the way there, Joey says, "Hey, man, I got a story for you." Basically, you guys are taking me to jail for this. I got you. Sure. You think that guy's all that. Well, you know what? I got a much better story to tell you. It ain't just about a boy fight. How about a dead body? And we're not talking the movie where the kids are trying to find the kid.
Stand By Me. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not Stand By Me. This is a murder, and it happened at that house you just left. As a matter of fact, there's a dead body in that house. It's in the basement. Used to be the wine cellar, I think. I mean, he lays it all out there for him, Joe. Now, you've already pointed out that these are pretty impressive homes. This type of a home is already a legendary home. And police, cops as much as I do, probably better. When you're getting a story from a guy who's got a felony rap sheet.
Yeah.
Do you believe him, or do you kind of go, yeah, he's just trying to get out of this latest rap?
I'm going to believe probably about 2/3 of what they say. Because, and you always feel like you're being leveraged for something else. Right. Because many times guys that have been in the system, they know how to work the system. And it all depends. It all depends on, if you think about the spinning wheel of fate, it all depends on which officer that arrow comes to rest on. And sometimes it comes to rest on somebody that begins to believe the story and is going to follow up. And when they do follow up, they're not going to believe what they see. Drugs, I think it goes without saying, ruin everything. And it's not just necessarily illicit drugs that are out there. Be honest with you, there are certain things that are, I don't want to mention any names, that are illegal that might not should be. But, you can have even people that are addicted to prescription drugs that are out there, and it destroys lives. And in this case, these individuals, Dave, had developed such a hunger. And I don't necessarily think that our victim in this case was the first supplier that they've ever had. I think that he was probably a means to an end, and that there had been dabbling going on all the while. But Dave, you got to kind of lay this out for me. Because if you're a police officer, and you're hurt, you hear that you have a body in the basement of the house you just came from. How'd the body get there? Because this guy's got to lay the story out. You got me on the hook now. I want to hear it. So I'm thinking as a cop.
I was looking at it from the stand when I was going back over this. I was trying to figure out at what point do police actually go, he's giving too many details. We need to take this seriously. Yeah. And I think it happened pretty quick because you've got to realize that you have a situation of domestic violence. You've got one guy in cuffs headed downtown, and he's offering up something that is a murder. And he's saying that my partner is the one that did it. And he's laying it out there and explaining everything that took place. And this was where the three-way comes into play. We mentioned the victim right off the bat is a guy named Jamie Carroll. He is a hairstylist who also dabbles in drug selling. Well, Jamie, Jeffrey Mundt, and Joey Banis get together for a party at Jeffrey's house. And they are partying hard. And they run out of drugs. And Jamie says, "No worries, guys. I'll go get some more drugs." And so while Jamie leaves the party to go get the drugs, the meth, they're snorting meth. And most of us know that methamphetamine is one of these drugs that keeps you up for days. It can keep you up for a long time. And depending on the type it can do a lot of things. But they were using meth. Jamie goes to get the meth. While he's gone, Joey and Jeffrey, now depending on who you listen to, came up with a plan to let's kill Jamie when it gets back. We'll take his drugs and his money.
Oh, so this is pillow talk then, right?
Yeah, apparently.
Yeah.
Apparently pillow talk.
Yeah. So they're in the post-coital bliss now at this point in time, and they've run out of drugs because you cannot continue on in this fueled passion.
Yep.
And so, I think about this guy, this kid has come to town, right? Just so that he can kind of fit in.
Right.
He's got a job cutting hair. He can't make ends meet.
Right.
And you have to look back and you think, was this even on this kid's radar? Like that this could happen to him. And it just goes from bad to worse at this point in time, Dave. Please go.
It was just as bad. The biggest problem they had, they being the police, is that they're being told a story by a convicted felon, by Joey Banis. And he tells them that when Jamie comes back, that Joey tells police, well, I was tired and I needed to take a break. So I went into, now again, you're having a gay sex party weekend, and Joey says, I'm tired. And he goes into a different room where he watches pornography while the other two guys are still going at it. And then he hears something bad happen in there. He claims that Jeffrey Mundt shot Jamie Carroll in the face, or strangled him, or beat him. I mean, any number of things going on. And when Joey is telling the police this, imagine what they're thinking, Joe, because you've got somebody who is saying there is a body stabbed and shot in this beautiful home, and we just left there and didn't see any bloody signs. Well, this happened several months ago. It didn't just happen.
I think it was like 7 months.
It was 7 months earlier, yes. And that's the whole point. He's going, this happened months ago. And they're like, well, where's the body then? Well, we went downstairs and I helped him. Now, I didn't help him kill him. Yeah. Jeffrey Mundt did the killing, but I helped him. We went to the store and got a 50-gallon tub, Rubbermaid tub.
Yeah.
And we got back. We were going to put him in the tub, dig a hole and bury him. And we dug the hole. They dug the hole 5 feet deep, Joe. Now, I don't know about you, but I have dug a few holes in my life. And I will tell you, when you're digging a hole by hand, when you start looking at 2 feet deep by hand is tough. When they were at the bottom of this beautiful old home, they were at bedrock, man.
Yeah, let me interject here because I've had like several cases. One in particular that stands out in mind about a guy that he beat his grandmother to death. He was living with his grandmother, and she lived in an equally old home, probably about this age. It was more of a craftsman style home. It wasn't like a Victorian mansion, but it had an external cellar door where it was a packed floor, but it wasn't like a concrete base or anything, but you could walk in, you had headroom is what I'm saying. And the grandson in the case that I'm talking about right now ran into the same problem that this pair ran into. And that is because the grandson in my case, this was in Atlanta, did a horrible job, all right, of trying to conceal it. It was ghastly and all those sorts of things. But when you're talking about digging that at that depth, they had to use pickaxes. And, most of the time we think about, well, I'm going to go in the backyard and do some gardening, perhaps. Well, I'm going to take a shovel with me. And well, when you go into the backyard, most of the time you're digging through a layer of sediment, topsoil, that sort of thing. You might think that it's a struggle, but it loosens up. You go into a basement of a home that's over 100 years old, okay? And you try to stick a shovel in a packed clay floor, because the one thing that we know about old homes is that we've always heard the term, well, they settle, and you'll hear them creaking and cracking and all that sort of things. I guess it's one of the charms of an old house. I've had a couple of old houses, but it's also terrifying too. But as it's settling, quote unquote settling, it's dropping, the entire time, and the entire environment around it is either rising or it is shifting with the settling of the home, depending upon how the house was originally constructed. And that settled home in the basement, is that dirt down there is getting tighter and tighter and tighter. Just imagine over 100 years of this happening. It's almost like somebody turning a screw, to where it's not sufficient just to turn the screw to get something locked in with it. You're going to go beneath the surface of that you're screwing the screw into, and it's going deeper and deeper. And all of a sudden you realize, my God, this is going to take forever. Are we ever going to get through down to the bottom depths here? Well, they finally did.
Lots of meth later.
Yeah.
They took all of Jamie's meth.
Yeah. Yeah. And the thing about it is they took this poor man, and he came back, and I'll use the term in good faith. He came back in good faith. He's the supplier.
Yeah.
All right.
Keep the party going.
And he's got the money. And keep in mind, money is really what he wanted. You talked about that from the top, Dave. Money is what he wanted just to survive. Mm-hmm. And here it is, that thing that he had desired so much, to get away from small town USA, to come to the big city. Yeah. He may have had his pockets full when he arrived back. He had the dope with him. And for that, he was butchered. Well, Brother Dave, now let me get this straight. He didn't go down to the funeral home and buy the super duper $20,000 lead lined titanium casket. That they didn't do that. They ran down the street to wherever it was, and they picked up the Rubbermaid, right? Yeah, I think there's nobody. I bet there's nobody within the sound of our voice right now that can't identify with one of these containers. My Lord, my life is a series of these Rubbermaid containers, putting Christmas decorations in it and baby pictures and school books and everything else, and putting them out in the shed, right? Everybody can identify with this. The problem is, unlike a coffin or casket, bodies generally fit in those. In this particular case, that ain't what happened, Dave.
Well, they're dealing with a couple things, Joe, because they're high. They've been up for a long time, so they're not in their right mind anyway when they decide to go and get this 50-gallon tub. But when they get back, Now, I'm not sure exactly when they dug the hole. I don't know that because they say they went to the store. And by the time they got back with the 50-gallon Rubbermaid, as well as a rubber foam to seal it up with, that rigor mortis had set in.
Yeah.
And rigor mortis. And
You
they
say
could
rigor.
not
That's okay.
fit the body in the tub that way.
Yeah.
And in their best way of thinking, this super intelligent, highly educated, overpaid Northwestern University cat and his convicted felon boyfriend, the best plan they could come up with to get this body into the Rubbermaid tub was to use a sledgehammer and break it up.
The country mouse that came to the city, right?
Yeah. They're breaking up Jamie.
Yeah. Here's the thing about it. And let's talk about rigor, however you want to pronounce it. Anything's okay with me. Thing about rigor mortis is that once it sets in, you can manually break it. You don't have to use a sledgehammer to do it. But if you're not familiar with the dead, a lot of people walk around out there thinking that once rigidity sets in the body, it's there forever and ever. Amen. Listen, after about 36 hours, and a lot of it depends upon the environment, bodies start to become flaccid again. The stiffness, that lactic acid begins to dissipate, and suddenly the body becomes flaccid once more. You can generally kind of fold the body up as best you can. But Dave, and even if you're in full rigidity, and I've had this happen because I've had to break rigor on the table before. And when I say break, don't misconstrue that. I'm not breaking something like, taking a sledgehammer and cracking the dead over their knees. That's not what we do. It will set in the arms. It sets in the legs, the hips, the head, the neck. So all it requires is manipulation, and you can actually bend at the knee. Now, if you're going to try to put him into this plastic container, that can be accomplished without having to do something. I mean, look, they've already gone down the road of being ghastly here. I mean, let's face it. All right. I guess, look, what more can we do? Let's get the sledgehammer, and assault the dead here. And that's what they chose to do. But you could easily manipulate a body just by manual manipulation. You can work it out of the joints. And because just think about all of the bodies. Think about this. I'll tell you why we have to do it in the morgue. If you've got somebody that dies, say seated in a chair, okay, and their arms are resting on the armrest. All right. Let's say they've committed suicide, and they die in the chair. Their arms on the armrest. Well, when we take them out of that chair, guess what? When I was in the Army, they used to put us in what's called the dying cockroach position. And what that meant is for punishment, we'd lay on our back and we'd have to hold our arms up and our legs up and look like a dying cockroach. And you had to stay there in that position. It looks like the dying cockroach position. If anybody's been in the military, you're familiar with that. So we would, in the morgue, we would actually have to break rigor in the shoulders and in the elbows, because if you didn't, when you go to make the initial incision and evisceration of the body, you're fighting with the dead person's arm because they're in the way. So you want the arms at their side. And it takes a little bit of work, but to go to this degree, which they did, adds another level of just a real disgusting situation, goes to horrific at this point in time.
And to jump to the end here, they buried him in 5 feet deep. They were able to get him with the sledgehammer. They pound Jamie's body into this little 50-gallon Rubbermaid tub. And the police said it was 5 feet down. These guys dug by hand 5 feet deep in this basement. And then they covered the body with lime, I'm guessing inside the Rubbermaid thing.
Yeah.
And buried it. And it was there for 7 months. 7 months go by, and that's when the domestic phone call comes into 911 where Joey Banis actually tells police there's a body in the basement. And it was right where he described it, pretty much. And so they were able to dig it up. But
investigators actually refer to this, Dave, as, let's see, I saw one headline relative to this. How to Screw Up a Perfect Murder.
Yep.
Because if you had just kept your mouth shut,
Yep.
no one probably would have been the wiser.
No.
At all. Who else is going to go in the basement? Maybe the next homeowner, whenever you pass on. You'd still have to do something with the body if you sell it, though. I'm sorry.
Dude,
go ahead.
No, dude, he was just trying to get out of a DV charge. Either that or because these guys they were a couple. That's the one thing I want to be, because I was looking at this as a little bit differently, kind of as a three-way hookup, just guys partying and got together.
Right.
Even though Joey Banis and Jeffrey Mundt hadn't been years long together, they'd met on a dating site, and they were a couple. They invited their drug dealer friend to join the party. He was friends with Joey. So it really was worse than what I thought to start with, if you can be worse. But you know what, Joe? They kill this guy for his drugs and his money and bury his body in the basement. But then a month later, they actually get arrested. Jeff, again, you got a dead body in your basement and you go to Chicago, stay in a really expensive hotel, and they're trying to pass fake money.
Yeah, oh my gosh, I completely forgot about this element. I think it was Mundt that was actually involved in counterfeiting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I could talk all day about, counterfeiting and that sort of thing from a forensics perspective. And as a death investigator, do you know, I've only had one case that involved somebody that was involved in counterfeiting. Uh-huh. And it turned out to be like one of the most renowned in the country. This guy did. And he died in Atlanta in a walk-up kind of, it's not really a flop house. He was renting, it was like a 2-room, and the 2-room didn't have a bath. You had a shared bath down the hallway. But Dave, I went, he died in the bed. It was a natural death. But Dave, I went into his room and he had money hanging from clothesline or string in there, like it was drying. I'd never seen anything, you see stuff like that in the movies, and I'd never thought about it. And it takes a certain level of skill, but when they were arrested, Dave, and again, they were trying to pass funny money to a merchant, and they picked up on it immediately, so the quality was probably not that good. Yeah. And I go back to Mundt with this. You mentioned, you would think that he would be, giving his academic background and his status at Northwestern, he would be a bit more sophisticated than all of this. Like he would rise above it. But, he's really loud, boisterous. And, oh, by the way, he loves meth and he loves counterfeit money. Look, we can go on and on about this kid that owned the house and his run-ins with the law. And, he's been on a dark path, but the darkest path of all to me is Mundt, because it's those people that seem, in my experience, at least, they seem to have it all, of course. And then when you kind of peel back those layers, it's so incredibly dark. You wonder what else they've been involved in their life.
Buddy. Well, the reason I added that is that was like 4 weeks after they had killed Jamie Carroll and buried him in the basement. They're together partying, and they try to pass the funny money. And you know who tipped them off? The doorman, the guy at the hotel.
That's right. That's right. It was the doorman.
But when the cops show up, they have him. Mundt's got a gun, an unregistered gun. Now, at the time, they didn't know anything about the gun, but now that they found a dead body in the basement, you've got to tell me the condition, because the gun that Jeffrey Mundt got caught with, him and Joey, and that's the gun that was used to shoot Jamie Carroll. But what kind of condition, after 7 months, is Jamie Carroll's body going to be in after being sealed up in a Rubbermaid 50-gallon tub, buried 5 feet deep in the basement of a home in Chicago?
Imagine
Louisville, not Chicago.
Yeah, Louisville. Imagine the nastiest human soup that you can imagine after that period of time. So in the bottom of this tub, which, by the way, it's plastic, so it is going to be sweating internally, okay, inside of this thing. It's kind of, because as the body is breaking down, and again, we've talked about autolytic changes, which is auto meaning self. So it's like self-digestion of the body at a cellular level. That's going to leach out. And so as it leaches out through the cells, the body produces, again, the foulest substance known to man, which is decomp fluid. Got a great story about that sometime. If we have another time to talk about that. It actually involves a good friend of mine and his brand new pair of lace-up white buck loafers that he had. But that's a story for another day. Stay tuned. And that you're not going to have necessarily the same insect activity. Now, trust me, 5 feet of earth is still going to ring the dinner bell for flies. They're going to show up. I'd like to know, for instance, let's just start at the top. I'd like to know if they had hung like pest strips in the basement, because flies are going to show up even with that much distance between them. I've found that flies, if there is a way, they're gonna find a way. I mean, just think about common house flies. You think your house is all sealed up. Maybe it's when you bring the groceries in from out of the car, they're going to slip through your door. They're going to wind up in the house with you. And there's even a type of fly that you find in caskets that come up as a result of us disinterring a body, and they're called coffin flies. And they have the ability to burrow down through the earth and get inside of a casket. So you find those in a lot of caskets that are out there in indwelling bodies. So it's a natural thing that occurs. But back to the soup. Inside of this plastic container, you're going to have probably about an inch of fluid just on the bottom. I'd say after 7 months like this, the skin is going to be greatly softened. It'll have it won't have a pinked up appearance to it. It will have begun to turn black and green. You would have, by 7 months, you're going to probably have protrusion, particularly at the joint areas if he's bent. You're going to have elements of the skeleton that are poking through at that point in time. And since this is not a dry, this is what's referred to as a wet decomp. Since it's not dry, like laying down on the ground where you have exposure to sunlight, the skin is going to be, or the tissue rather, is going to be very, very spongy. Like, I've actually removed bodies at this far down the line and further. And even with a gloved hand, Dave, and this is one of the more disgusting things I've ever had to do as a death investigator. And it happened to me all the time. I think those things that you hate so much, they either stand out in your mind, they happen to you with more frequency, the more you dread them. Where you would grab a body and it was in such a state of decay, the body doesn't pull apart, but your fingertips actually sink through the tissue as you're removing the body, and you can feel your fingertips going into the body to a certain depth. That's what they would have experienced. But my thought is, more than likely, hopefully they did this, when they were able to understand down in that basement, which would have been a horrible area to have worked in if you were the coroner investigator, or the ME investigator, or certainly the crime scene people that were down there, and of course the homicide detective. Once they saw this body in this contained plastic thing that they'd purchased, I'm hoping they didn't take the body out of the container at the scene. And this would have been a yeoman's task to get this thing up out of the ground and then move it probably up a staircase. Imagine this. And this thing's sloshing around inside of there, just sloshing back and forth, and you can hear it. And the more you move out into the open air, guess who really does show up now? It's going to be the flies. And I don't care if it's in the dead of winter, they're going to show up, and they're going to be lighting on you to get to that body. If you're still wearing the same gloves, you look down at your gloves and you've got flies all over your hands. It's because they smell it. It's like ringing the dinner bell for them. But on the other hand, if they kept the body inside of that container and they take it back to the morgue, I'm a big I'm a big fan of x-rays. If you can x-ray that body in place, and this goes to the fact that Mundt got caught with this weapon. If the projectile is still in the body, if you do x-rays of the entire tub with the body still in place and that lead core projectile is still in the body, as decaying as the body might appear, you can still see that radio opaque image of the bullet within the body. One of the interesting things that you see, I've never talked about this, but I'm going to mention here. One of the interesting things that you see on postmortem x-rays with decomposing bodies, did you know that internally you begin to see these systems that are breaking down, and within the body itself, you can see little gas pockets inside of the body, and you have to do a double take at it because they're kind of outlined. You can kind of see an outline of them, and they, like a normal x-ray, if you have a fresh dead, it's going to look pretty much like someone's x-ray that was taken in life. But if you get a decomp and you x-ray them, the interior of the body is going to look completely different than if you have the fresh dead that you're working with, or like a living patient. But the key is to try to locate that bullet or that projectile, and hopefully they did, and they have this weapon, and lo and behold, this idiot is still carrying the weapon. So let me get this straight. You go to all this trouble to dig through packed clay with a pickaxe and a shovel. You buy a container, you stuff him in it, you dig it 5 feet deep, by the way.
Yeah.
You stick him into the bottom of it, and then you cover the thing up, and now you're going to run buck wild up in Chicago, passing funny money. Oh, and by the way, carrying the same weapon that you murdered a guy with. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know really what their hiring practices are at Northwestern. I got questions. I'd like to know, what is it that was so special about this guy? But Dave, I think that everyone would like to know what actually became of these two desperados.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, Joey Banis had a track record of convictions. He is the one whose dad was a surgeon, grew up in a very privileged lifestyle, actually had owned a couple of clubs in downtown Louisville, but he also had a drug problem, and he'd been in and out of jail because of it. So when Joey Banis and Jeffrey Mundt basically tell the same story about the murder of Jamie Carroll, but they both change who did it.
Yeah.
When you hear Jeffrey's the one. I was in the room watching gay porn while they were in there, and Jeffrey killed him. Meanwhile, when Jeffrey tells the story, it's Joey who did the killing, but they both admitted to putting him in the 50-gallon tub and getting rid of the body, digging the hole and all that. So it comes down to a trial. Joey went to trial first, and to keep the death penalty off the table. And pay attention to this. This is something that's going to be going on with Kohberger, okay?
Okay.
Right now, they're trying ways to keep the death penalty, get the death penalty off the table in his case. Well, here's what Joey Banis did. To get the death penalty off, he agreed that he would testify against Jeffrey Mundt in Jeffrey's trial. Now, Joey's trial was coming first. And so he's saying, I didn't do it. He did it. And I will testify. And by the way, I will not take the death penalty off the table, and I will, I will not challenge. I will not appeal any conviction if it happens. Okay, you got me. I will not appeal if I'm convicted. Well, Joey Banis was convicted. And he did testify at the trial of Jeffrey Mundt several months later. Well, Jeffrey Mundt, remember, Joey Banis, convicted felon with a lot of drug problems. And here's Jeffrey Mundt. He's a gay guy who likes to party. He had told everybody that. No big surprise here. But I'm not a killer. I own this beautiful home. He's the bad guy.
Right.
And the jury bought it. So Jeffrey Mundt actually was judged not guilty. He was acquitted of the murder charge. But Jeffrey Mundt was convicted of getting rid of the corpse, of being involved with that. So Jeffrey Mundt acquitted of murder. Joey Banis convicted of murder. Jeffrey Mundt was sentenced to 8 years in prison for what he did with the body of Jamie Carroll. But because he had spent time in jail leading up to the actual trial taking place, the day he was convicted and or the day that he was sentenced, he was eligible for parole. So he was pretty much released within a matter of no time. Joey Banis, convicted, remains in prison for the rest of his life, even though he did try to appeal the decision, by the way. And that didn't work. He's still in jail. So there you have it, Joe.
Wow. Yeah. And, gee, thanks to my wife for putting this on our radar. Wow. Oh, my Lord. Yeah. And, the other thing is she, again, she was thinking back all those years ago when I had that drug fueled case that I worked in Atlanta where the guy jumped through the plate glass window. And it also, I think because of the old home, this case doesn't necessarily have the same Southern charm to it, but it reminded her of Midnight in the Garden of Evil as well, where you've got this fine home that's a real prize. And so that was one of the things that drew her eye to this. So she was quite fascinated by it. But this case in and of itself is something that is truly a tragedy. This young man had left a life that, one level, I'm sure that he found quite boring, that it wasn't everything that he thought that it could be. But unfortunately, in the end, what he wound up with was a complete and total horror show. I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.